Okay, here's our Chapter 6 summary, where we are talking about creating offerings for consumers. And we start out here talking about product, price, and service. So the product is generally what we think of as a tangible product that people buy. And then it has features and benefits along with it. People buy something because they've got, people buy something that satisfies a need. So a benefit is any feature in this that satisfies a want or a need, and that's why the people are purchasing it. The price is going to reflect the benefits, right? The more benefits there are to it, the more the people receive from it, the more they're willing to pay. And that's why you see high-end stuff and low-end stuff. And there's an increasing focus on what we call the total cost of ownership, or TCO. And so that's not just the price to purchase it, but that's the price to purchase it, to own it, to use it. And then if there's additional costs to dispose of it. We don't see that so much in consumer products, but in business-to-business products that does show up a lot to cost. But to think of it with our products, think about an iPod. They use this one in the book, and you purchase the iPod, but then you've got to purchase the music to go with it. So that kind of adds to the total cost of ownership. Or again, to use it, they use the example of a sweater. If you're looking at two sweaters that cost the same, but one will require dry cleaning and the other one you can wash yourself, that makes the total cost of that one more expensive. Another really good example are printers. And so one printer might be cheaper, but then the ink cartridges are a lot more expensive. So the total cost over the life of that is higher, whereas another product, the initial price might be a little bit higher, but then the ink cartridges are a lower price, so the total cost might be lower. So there really is an increasing move on that, on focusing on the total cost of ownership, not just the price you pay when you first buy it. And then services are any actions that provide additional benefits to the customers. Additional benefits. So these would be things that go along with it. They're perishable, right? So you can't store that up. You can't purchase those ahead of time and use it. So that, but many tangible products have intangible service components along with it, and we'll talk a little bit about those, because that's an important part of the product too, not just the physical tangible product, but the services that go along with it. So the next section of the book talks a little bit about product versus service dominated marketing. And the product dominating is the traditional approach. That's what marketing was for a very long time. The product, the price, and the service were thought of as three separate areas. They marketers didn't really integrate those together. And the focus then, this really started in the Industrial Revolution, where we were suddenly able to make a lot of products, was before, when everything was hand done. And so the focus really was on the focus was on just making cheaper products, because I could produce, we started assembly line things in mass production. And so first the focus was on make it cheaper. And then the focus really kind of turned on making better and better products. And then to try to combine those two, make it better and cheaper. But again, the focus here was all just on the product, not really the customer. So then we moved into more the service-dominated marketing. And so the focus here is on the customer and, customer. And really thinking about the customer benefits and what the customers value. And so which should still result in better products and that kind of stuff, but really we're focusing here on now just changing the focus to the customer's point of view. And so what services are needed to make this more, to add value to the customer? What features and what services we have to do to add value? And so we kind of look at the core product and the augmented product. We talk about the basic thing that you're purchasing, and then all the other things that go with it, augmented product. And really, the customer is in the driver's seat here. The customer demands are what defines the product. In the product dominating, it was more the marketer thinking, this is what I think people want. And now it's really focused on the customer demands. If it's not selling, then they take it off and they change it and that kind of thing, which really makes a lot more sense. Again, I know I've said this before, but the key to successful marketing isn't to come up with something and then convince people they want it, which is kind of the product dominated thing. The key is to figure out what people want and then provide it. And so that's the service dominated. That's really where we are now. Here's a little, illustration here. The core product might be the physical product. So for instance, in this case, it might be, your iPhone. And then the augmented product are any of the things that go with it. So it might be a warranty on it. It might be insurance, in case you drop it. It might be tech support that you have. It could also be accessories like your earbuds or your phone case or something like that. So the core product is the one thing, and then all the other stuff that goes with it is the augmented product there. Here's another kind of example. So at the heart of everything should be what the customers value, and then that should be driving what the actual product is, the features of it, the design of it, all those things, and then the augmented product. So all the stuff that comes in addition to just, because when you buy a product, you're not just buying a physical product, right? Sometimes you're buying a brand as well, or style, or that kind of thing. And so that's all part of the actual product. I also wanted to briefly talk about kind of issues that come up in service marketing. So since you can't, they have different challenges than a physical product. So one is the perishability, right? You can't store it up. You can't purchase it ahead of time. And let's use a restaurant in our example, or a hair salon. Either one of these would work. So you can't stock up. It has to be when the need is met. Intangibility sometimes makes it hard to sell too, and that's why you see some of these things like hair salons try to make it really posh, or even a restaurant. The decor. If you look at a bank, they're going to try to the atmosphere is, they're going to try to project an image that would make you feel secure in this, or make you feel special. So it's intangible, so it's hard to prove ahead of time that your product is better to somebody else's, because people can't compare quality and that kind of stuff. So you have to try to send signals like that. Variability is the other problem. Think about a restaurant, the service, and this kind of goes along too with the inseparability. So you can't separate the product from the providers. Let's say if you go into a restaurant and you have a horrible waitress, it's really hard to separate the waitress herself and the service you got from the restaurant, even though it could have just been one person. Maybe it's a great restaurant and you just hit the bad server. And the other thing is the variability. It's the same type of thing. Maybe she's really a great waitress and she just had a really bad day, and you could go back another time and have really great service. So you're not going to get the same level of service. The level of service will vary. And so that makes it tough too. And that's why training becomes very important, to try to have consistent service. But people do have a bad day. And so if you just hit it once and this one person had a bad day, that's really how you're going to judge that restaurant or that hair salon. And that makes it very tough then to let's say you're the owner of the restaurant, it's hard to recover from that kind of thing. So trying to instill consistency and good training and all that kind of thing becomes very, very important, more so than in a tangible product. So now we're going to talk about different product lines. So the technology platform is the core tech on which the product is built. And so again, we're kind of thinking about physical products here, but it's not just limited to tangible products. Knowledge itself can be a technology platform in a service environment. So the level of expertise and knowledge that somebody has can can affect that as well. So that's kind of our base here. And then a product line is a group of related offerings. The line depth is the number of different offerings in a product line. So think about flavors of Cheerios. So there's the regular, and then there's the multigrain, and there's the honey nut, and there's all those different ones. And so that's the more different offerings within that same product line you have, the deeper the line is. One of the ways that you can grow your market is a line extension, where you have similar products added to the same line. And so we're using the same platform or the same basic process and the same brand, but offering a different lines within there. So I think that the example in here might be different types of cereal within the same thing, or different types of like the iPhone. You use the same platform, but you have the 3 and the 4, and then they came out with the C, which was a little bit cheaper version. It's the same platform, but a different thing, but it's still that same iPhone brand. And then even within there, you can have the different levels of memory in it, and so you've got some variations, but it's still the same platform and the same brand. A line breadth is how many different lines you have. So you might have, I think the example they used in the book was Campbell's soup then has the Chunky brand as well, and they're both Campbell's, but they're 2 different brands within there. And so the more you have, that the broader the line is. And then a product mix is an entire assortment of products that a firm has to offer. So General Mills, for example, has cereal, and they have soup, and they have baked goods, and each one of those would be a product line. And you put them all together, and you've got their product mix. And sometimes it's very diverse, and sometimes it's pretty like these are all food related things. And so it's somewhat consistent that some companies have very broad mixes there with lots of different things. So that leads us into the 4 categories of consumer offerings. And any good can be split into one of these. So a convenience good is something that people don't put a lot of effort into. So for these types of goods, and this is very important to know what your good falls under in the minds of your consumers. If you're selling a convenience good, location is very important. So these are sometimes going to be impulse purchases, but not always. But think about gas. Not too many people go out of their way to get gas. They just hit the gas station that is the most convenient. Like if there's 2 right across from each other, you're going to hit the one that's on your side of the road. You're probably not going to drive across to get the other one. Toothpaste, you're not going to drive around town looking for, toothpaste or even the best price on toothpaste. So, think about stuff they sell in convenience stores. That would be a good example. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this. I'm going to put in little effort, little time, and pick it up when I need it, which is why location is really important. A shopping good is something where I do want to compare. And in these, this is why you see these types of things in shopping centers or in malls, because people do want to shop around a little bit. And so if I put them all together, I can compare. So it might be appliances, it might be TVs. Clothing is a good example, and shoes. So if I want shoes, sometimes I want to look at a couple different shoe stores and compare before I do it. And so brand kind of matter here, where they often matter less with convenience goods. And they're generally going to be kind of grouped together so that people can easily, if the mall has 3 shoe stores and then there's one downtown, there's not too many people that are going to drive downtown to check out that 4th one, right? I'll just check the ones that are easy for me to get together and compare. And so that's why you tend to see those in shopping centers. Specialty goods are generally very differentiated, less distributed. You might not be able to get it everywhere, whereas shopping goods will probably be available in a lot of places. So think about Rolex. There's only so many places you can go to buy a Rolex, or a Rolls Royce. There's much more limited distribution there, and they're going to be very differentiated through whatever, usually quality, but not always. Any custom-made stuff would fall under this one too. So custom-made furniture or something like that might fall into that one. Unsought goods are things that you don't think about until you need them. So funeral arrangements, nobody shops around really for that. A plumber, you don't really shop ahead for a plumber to have one on hand just in case. You just, or sometimes like car towing, things like that. So those are kind of emergency things, and you didn't think you were going to need it, but now, which a lot of those, I'm not sure it's really still the case, but it used to be, in the phone book, that's why you'd always say like AAA towing, because they figure people flip open the phone book to towing and just see what comes first. Now it would probably be kind of trying to come up first on the Google search would be the effective means for that one. So everybody falls under one of those, and it is important as a marketer to know how people look at your product, and sometimes they can kind of move. Business to business offerings, we got similar. So capital equipment is big equipment used to manufacture. This is kind of long-term things. Raw materials would be like lumber and steel and those kinds of things. Original equipment manufacture are components, essentially. So a switch or a computer chip or something like that was manufactured by one guy and then sold to another guy who uses it in a final good. So the person who manufactures it isn't selling it to the final good. He sells it to another manufacturer who puts it in theirs. MRO is maintenance, repair, and operations. So these are like janitorial supplies that you need in the manufacturing thing, hardware, those types of products. And then everything else falls under this facilitating offerings. And so these are not part of the product, but really still necessary to do that. So it might be banking services, marketing research services, who else fun? Transportation stuff, any office stuff, computers, copiers, all those types of things. And then the transportation. So it's critical to the business, but it's not part of the product. Those all fall under facilitating. Next, we talk about brands. And the brand is the name, the picture, the design, or the combination of all of those used to identify the seller's offerings. And so if you think about Coca-Cola, for example, the name Coca-Cola, the font that it's written in, the shape of the bottle, those are all part of the brand, because those are all things that you use to identify that and differentiate it from Pepsi or any of those other ones. So branding as a verb is all the activities that are used to create that brand and position it in the minds of the consumers. And it's very, very important. They want you, as soon as you see that logo, to think of that company right away. The name is the spoken part, and then the brand mark, is the symbol associated with it. And brand extension then involves trying to carry that same brand and that same position over to a new product category. Cannibalization is when their new offerings eat into the sales of their older offerings. So sometimes it might still increase your total sales, but the sales of one product would go down as people switch over to one of your newer offerings. So that's something that you have to think about when you're trying to extend the brand there. I'm going to leave this one here so you can do these if you want, but these are like some logo quizzes and some brand quizzes to see how and the faster you get it, the better job they have done of positioning that, the better job they've done of branding. If you see that symbol and you know right away, like a Nike swoosh or whatever, that's very effective branding there. And then there's a couple other, I have some little videos there on branding. Steve Jobs talking about branding, and actually it's somebody talking about Steve Jobs on branding. So it's not, it's good info, but it's a little bit dull. But if you have time, it's some good info. The small business branding is actually a very interesting one on how branding can help build small businesses. So it's not just for big corporations like Coca-Cola and that kind of stuff. It really is for small businesses as well. Maybe even more important for small businesses. And then two more things here. Packaging. Packaging is part of the product. So we're, in case you didn't know, so we're talking about we're into the 4Ps now, and this is the first one, that's the product. And packaging has a lot to do, and this is part of the product. It has to communicate the brand, it has to communicate the benefits of this product, it has to protect the product, it has to prevent, leakage and protect all that kind of stuff. And then depending on what the product is, a lot of them have to contain, like any food product has to have nutritional information and all this stuff, or warning labels, all these kinds of things. So it really has a lot to accomplish. It has to grab the consumer's attention. It really, there's a lot to do in one little package there. Primary packaging holds one single unit, retail unit. Secondary packaging is at the wholesale level, and then tertiary packing is how it's shipped for, to load on the truck or the train or whatever that. So for shipping and efficiency. So generally, the tertiary packing would then contain the secondary, and the secondary would be broken up into the primary packing that would get to the store. And the last thing here is just a couple things about different positions in marketing, career-related things. So a brand manager is somebody that's responsible for all the different decisions within that brand, and managing that brand and making sure people recognize it, making sure everything is consistent with the positioning. A product manager then would be for a specific product or product line within that brand. The category manager might have a little bit broader there with different groupings of offerings, and then the market manager might be within a specific market. So it might be for a product, or it might be a geographic region or something like that. So those would be the types of positions you would see in there. And I think that is it for chapter, what are we on? 6, chapter 6.